I never thought the woman who saved my son's life would become the reason I stood in a California courtroom defending everything I had left. Her final act of heroism saved my son's life, but her family's lawsuit turned our gratitude into a bitter war. The decision I made in that courtroom tore my family apart, but I had no choice. Please listen to my story and tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong, because this decision didn't just destroy my reputation in our community. It cost me my relationship with my own sister, turned our parents against me, and left our family so fractured that my own children haven't spoken to their cousins in 2 years. My name is Rebecca Chen, and until 3 years ago, I lived what most people would call a blessed life in Sacramento. I was a marketing director at a growing tech startup. My husband David ran a successful architecture firm, and we had 2 beautiful children. Our son Ethan was 8 years old, bright and curious, always asking questions about how things worked. Our daughter Lily was 5, still in that magical phase where everything was an adventure. We lived in a spacious home in East Sacramento, the kind with a backyard pool and enough room for the kids to run around. Life was good, maybe too good, and I should have known that kind of peace never lasts. We hired Maria Gonzalez 4 years before the accident. She came to us through a referral from a friend whose own housekeeper was retiring. Maria was 42, originally from a small town outside Guadalajara, and she had been living in California for nearly 15 years. She had warm brown eyes that crinkled when she smiled, which was often, and a work ethic that put most people to shame. What started as a twice-weekly housekeeping arrangement quickly evolved into something much more. Maria became part of our family in ways I never anticipated. She learned that Ethan loved dinosaurs and started bringing him books about paleontology from the library. She taught Lily how to make traditional Mexican hot chocolate on cold mornings. When David and I both had late meetings, Maria would stay past her scheduled hours, never asking for extra pay, just wanting to make sure the kids had a proper dinner and help with homework. She became the grandmother my children never had. Both sets of our parents lived across the country in New York and Florida. Maria filled that gap with genuine love, not obligation. I increased her hours and her pay substantially over those years. She worked for us 4 days a week, sometimes 5 when we needed her. She had her own room in our house, a comfortable space on the first floor that she decorated with photos of her own family back in Mexico. She had 3 children of her own, all adults now. Her youngest daughter, Carmen, was 23 and working as a nurse in Los Angeles. Her 2 sons, Miguel and Rafael, were 28 and 31, both working in construction. Maria sent money home to her elderly mother and helped support her children when they needed it. She was proud of her family, talked about them constantly, showed us pictures on her phone. We became close in the way that happens when someone is woven into the daily fabric of your life. Maria knew how I took my coffee. She knew that David got irritable when his blood sugar dropped and would have snacks ready. She knew that Ethan had nightmares sometimes, and that singing to him in Spanish somehow calmed him down faster than anything else. She knew that Lily was allergic to strawberries before I even remembered to mention it. This woman was more than an employee. She was family. The accident happened on a Thursday in late September. I remember it was Thursday because that was the day Ethan had soccer practice after school, and I was supposed to pick him up at 5. I had gotten stuck in a meeting that ran long, one of those frustrating situations where everyone keeps talking in circles and nothing gets decided. I called Maria at 4:30 and asked if she could pick up Ethan. She agreed immediately, like she always did, never making me feel guilty about the constant last-minute changes to our schedule. Maria drove our second car, a Honda CR-V that we basically let her use whenever she needed it. It was reliable, well-maintained, and had excellent safety ratings. I had personally made sure of that when we bought it 2 years earlier. She picked up Ethan from the soccer field at 5:15. According to the other parents who were there, Ethan came running out with his usual energy, grass stains on his knees, talking excitedly about a goal he almost made. Maria ruffled his hair and helped him load his gear into the back of the SUV. They were driving home on Highway 50, a route we took dozens of times every month. Traffic was moderate, weather was clear, visibility was perfect. Maria was doing everything right, staying in her lane, following at a safe distance. Then a pickup truck 2 vehicles ahead had a tire blowout. The driver overcorrected, swerving wildly across 3 lanes. The car directly in front of Maria slammed on its brakes. Maria hit her brakes too, but the car behind her, driven by a distracted driver who was later cited for texting while driving, slammed into the back of the CRV at full speed. The force of the impact sent our car spinning. It rotated 180 degrees and was then hit again on the passenger side by another vehicle that couldn't stop in time. The entire passenger side crumpled. Ethan was sitting in the back seat on the passenger side. In the split second before that secondary impact, Maria did something that the accident reconstruction expert would later call extraordinary. She unbuckled her seatbelt, threw herself across the center console and into the back seat, and covered Ethan's body with her own. The second impact crushed the passenger side of the vehicle. The door caved in. The window exploded. Metal and glass went everywhere. Ethan had cuts and bruises, a concussion, and a broken left arm. He was terrified and in pain, but he was alive. Maria absorbed the brunt of the impact. She suffered catastrophic internal injuries, multiple broken ribs, a collapsed lung, severe trauma to her abdomen and chest. When the first responders arrived, they had to use specialized equipment to extract them from the wreckage. I got the call at 5:47. I was still at the office, finally wrapping up that pointless meeting. The hospital told me there had been an accident, that Ethan and Maria were both being transported to UC Davis Medical Center, that I needed to come immediately. They wouldn't tell me anything else over the phone. I remember my hands shaking so badly I could barely end the call. I remember running out of the conference room, not even grabbing my purse, just my keys. I remember calling David from the car, barely able to form words, just saying there was an accident and to meet me at the hospital. The drive to UC Davis was 17 minutes that felt like 17 hours. I kept thinking about all the worst possibilities, my mind creating terrible scenarios. I prayed. And I'm not even a religious person, but I prayed to anyone who might be listening to please let my son be okay. When I got to the emergency room, they took me to a private consultation room, which I immediately knew was a bad sign. A doctor came in, a young woman with kind eyes and tired shoulders, and told me that Ethan was going to be fine. He was injured, he was scared, but he was going to be fine. Then she told me about Maria. She explained the extent of the injuries, the emergency surgery they were performing, the massive internal bleeding they were trying to control. She used phrases like multiple organ damage and critical condition, and the next few hours will tell us more. She said that Maria had used her own body as a shield. She said that without that protection, given the severity of the impact on the passenger side, Ethan would likely not have survived. David arrived 20 minutes later. We sat together in that horrible waiting room with the fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs, holding hands, not really talking. We were allowed to see Ethan briefly. He was sedated, his left arm in a cast, cuts and bruises covering his face, but he was breathing on his own, and the doctors said all his injuries would heal. I sat next to his bed and cried, overwhelmed with relief and terror and gratitude all mixed together. Maria died at 2:15 in the morning, 9 hours after the accident. The doctors said they did everything they could, but the internal damage was too extensive. Her body had protected Ethan, but there was nothing left to save. I was there when they told us. David and I were still in the waiting room, drinking bad coffee, checking on Ethan every hour. When the surgeon came out and shook his head, I felt something break inside me that I don't think ever fully healed. We called Maria's children that morning, Carmen, her daughter, was the first one we reached. I had her number because Maria had given it to me years ago as an emergency contact. I had to tell this young woman that her mother was dead, that she died saving my son. Carmen screamed. It was a sound I still hear sometimes in my nightmares, raw grief pouring through the phone. She said she would call her brothers, that they would come to Sacramento immediately. The next few days were a blur of grief and logistics and trying to help Ethan process what had happened. He was released from the hospital after 2 days. He had nightmares every night, waking up screaming about the crash. He kept asking for Maria, not fully understanding that she was gone. When we finally sat him down and explained that Maria had died, that she wasn't coming back, he cried for hours. He said it was his fault, that if he hadn't had soccer practice, none of this would have happened. Breaking through that guilt took months of therapy. Maria's children arrived 3 days after the accident. We met them at the hospital where Maria's body was being held. Carmen looked so much like her mother, the same warm eyes, though now they were red and swollen from crying. Miguel and Rafael were tall, broad-shouldered men who looked completely lost. We all cried together. I hugged Carmen and told her how sorry I was, how much Maria meant to us, how she died a hero saving my son. They thanked us for taking care of their mother, for treating her well, for loving her. We immediately offered to help with funeral expenses. Maria didn't have life insurance, and we knew her family didn't have the resources to handle everything. David and I paid for the entire funeral, a beautiful service at a local Catholic church that Maria had attended occasionally. We paid to have her body transported back to Mexico so she could be buried in her hometown next to her father. We set up a fund for her elderly mother. We gave Carmen, Miguel, and Rafael $15,000 each to help with their immediate expenses. We did all of this because it felt like the bare minimum we could do for a woman who gave her life for our child. The funeral was heartbreaking. Over 200 people came, many from the local Latino community who knew Maria from church or from other families she had worked for. Everyone told stories about her kindness, her work ethic, her love for her family. Ethan insisted on coming despite his injuries. He stood in front of everyone and said, in a small, shaking voice, that Maria was his hero. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. After the funeral, Maria's family went back to their lives. Carmen returned to Los Angeles, Miguel and Rafael to their jobs. We stayed in touch, mostly through text messages. I would check in on them, see how they were doing, if they needed anything. Carmen sent me a picture of Maria's grave in Mexico, a simple stone marker with flowers. I sent her a long message about how much we missed Maria, how Ethan was doing in therapy, how we would never forget what she did. Everything seemed like it was moving toward healing, as much as any of us could heal from something so tragic. Then, 4 months after Maria's death, I received a legal document via certified mail. It was a lawsuit. Maria's family was suing me, my husband, and our company car insurance for wrongful death. I stood in my kitchen holding those papers, reading the words over and over, trying to make sense of them. The lawsuit claimed that we were negligent in allowing Maria to drive our vehicle. It claimed that we had put undue pressure on Maria to perform tasks outside her job description. It claimed that we had failed to properly maintain the vehicle. It claimed that Maria's death was a direct result of our negligence, and that her family deserved substantial compensation for their loss. The dollar amount they were seeking was staggering, $2 million. The lawsuit listed pain and suffering, loss of financial support, emotional distress, and a dozen other legal terms I barely understood. I called David at his office, my voice shaking. He came home immediately. We read through the entire lawsuit together, trying to understand what was happening. The thing that hurt most wasn't the money, though that was certainly terrifying. It was the way the lawsuit portrayed us. It made us sound like cruel employers who had exploited Maria, who had forced her into dangerous situations, who bore responsibility for her death. It completely ignored the reality of our relationship with her. It ignored the fact that she died performing an act of heroism that had nothing to do with negligence on our part. It felt like a betrayal of everything Maria had meant to us. We hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Thornton, who specialized in civil litigation. She reviewed the case and told us bluntly that we were looking at a long, expensive legal battle. She explained that wrongful death suits could be complicated, that even though the accident wasn't our fault, the family could argue that we created the circumstances that led to Maria being in that vehicle at that moment. She said that juries could be unpredictable, especially in cases involving sympathetic plaintiffs like grieving children who lost their mother. I wanted to call Carmen, to talk to her, to understand why they were doing this. Patricia strongly advised against it. She said any communication with the plaintiffs outside of legal channels could be used against us. She said we needed to let the lawyers handle everything. So I didn't call. I didn't text. I cut off all communication with Maria's family, and that silence felt like another death. The lawsuit consumed our lives. We had to provide years of financial records, maintenance logs for the vehicle, documentation of Maria's employment, insurance policies, and endless other paperwork. We had to sit through depositions where the opposing lawyer asked hostile questions designed to make us look like villains. They asked why we had Maria working so many hours. They asked why she was picking up our child. They asked if we had properly trained her in defensive driving. They asked if we had verified her driver's license. Every question felt like an accusation. The worst part was what the lawsuit did to my family, beyond David, Ethan, and Lily. My younger sister, Amanda, lived in San Francisco with her husband and 2 kids. Amanda and I had always been close, talking on the phone several times a week, visiting each other on holidays. When I told her about the lawsuit, I expected support. Instead, she shocked me by saying that maybe Maria's family had a point. Amanda said that we should have been more careful about the power dynamics in our relationship with Maria. She said that even if we thought we were treating her well, we were still employers, and Maria might have felt obligated to do things she wasn't comfortable with. She said that settling the lawsuit would be the right thing to do, that fighting it made us look heartless. When I tried to explain our side, she cut me off and said I was being defensive. That conversation ended badly. We didn't speak for 2 weeks. When we finally talked again, it was worse. Amanda had apparently been discussing the situation with our parents, and they had opinions too. My mother called me crying, saying she didn't understand why I was fighting people who lost their daughter. My father said I needed to think about how this looked, that our family reputation was being damaged. Neither of them seemed to understand that settling would mean admitting fault for Maria's death, would mean saying that we were responsible for the accident, would potentially bankrupt us. The division in my family grew deeper. Amanda stopped inviting us to family gatherings. Our kids, who had always been close with their cousins, suddenly weren't included in birthday parties or holiday celebrations. My parents chose Amanda's side, or at least that's how it felt. They would call her regularly but barely spoke to me. The lawsuit wasn't just about money or legal liability anymore. It had become a wedge that was splitting apart relationships I thought were unbreakable. Meanwhile, Ethan was struggling. He was seeing a therapist twice a week to deal with the trauma of the accident and the grief of losing Maria. Then he started hearing things at school. Some parents in our community had heard about the lawsuit and were talking about it. Kids repeat what their parents say, and suddenly Ethan was being asked questions at school about whether his mom was a bad person. One kid told him that his family was responsible for killing their housekeeper. Ethan came home crying, asking me if it was true, if Maria died because we did something wrong. Having to explain to my 8-year-old son that the family of the woman who saved his life was now trying to take everything from us was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I tried to keep it age appropriate, but there was no way to make it make sense to him. How could I explain that sometimes grief makes people angry and they look for someone to blame? How could I explain that legal battles often have very little to do with actual justice? Patricia, our lawyer, kept pushing for a settlement. She said that even though we had a strong case, trials were risky. She said that we should offer a substantial sum, maybe $300,000, and hope the family would accept it. She explained that fighting this all the way to trial would cost us over $100,000 in legal fees alone, and there was always a chance we could lose and be on the hook for the full $2 million. David wanted to settle. He was terrified of losing everything we had built. He worried about what would happen to our kids if we lost the case, if we had to sell our house, if our savings were wiped out. He had nightmares about bankruptcy. He said we should just pay them and move on with our lives, that no amount of money was worth this stress. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't agree to a settlement that would essentially say we were responsible for Maria's death. The accident reports were clear. The distracted driver who hit us was cited and charged. The tire blowout that started the chain reaction was investigated and ruled as a manufacturing defect. There was no negligence on our part. The vehicle was properly maintained. We had records proving it. Maria had a valid driver's license and clean driving record. She wasn't overworked or coerced. She was doing a favor for people she cared about, something she had done dozens of times before. More importantly, settling felt like it would dishonor Maria's sacrifice. She didn't die because of our negligence. She died because she made a split-second decision to protect a child she loved. That was heroism, pure and simple. Agreeing that we were somehow at fault would turn her final act into something else, something tainted by liability and blame. I couldn't do that to her memory. Now, this is where I did something that I want you to advise me on, if I was right or wrong. I told our lawyer that we would not settle, that we were going to fight this case all the way to trial if necessary. I made this decision against my husband's wishes, against my lawyer's advice, against the pleas of my parents and sister. I decided that protecting the truth about what happened, about who Maria was and what she did, was more important than protecting our bank account or our family peace. David was furious with me. We had the biggest fight of our marriage. He said I was being stubborn and self-righteous. He said I was putting my pride above our children's security. He said that if we lost this case and lost everything, it would be my fault. He slept in the guest room for a week. My parents called and yelled at me. My mother said I was being selfish. My father said I was risking the family's future over principle. Amanda sent me a long text message saying I had lost perspective, that I cared more about being right than about doing right. The pressure was immense. I started having panic attacks. I would wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, convinced I was making a terrible mistake. I questioned myself constantly. Was I being stubborn? Was I letting my ego drive this decision? Was I really honoring Maria's memory, or was I just trying to prove something? But every time I considered giving in, I would remember Maria's face, her kindness, her love for my children. I would remember that she died protecting Ethan, and I knew I couldn't let anyone, even her own family, turn that into something ugly. Patricia worked hard to build our defense. We gathered extensive documentation. We had the complete accident report showing that the distracted driver was at fault. We had maintenance records for the vehicle showing it had been serviced regularly and was in excellent condition. We had testimony from other families Maria had worked for, all stating that she was professional, reliable, and never complained about working conditions. We had evidence of all the financial support we had provided to her family after her death. We also discovered something troubling during the discovery process. Maria's oldest son, Raphael, had not wanted to file the lawsuit. He had actually opposed it. It was Miguel, the middle son, who had pushed for it, apparently influenced by a cousin who had connections to a personal injury lawyer known for aggressive tactics. This lawyer had convinced them that they deserved compensation, that employers always have insurance to cover these situations, that it wasn't personal but rather about getting what they were owed. This information didn't make me feel better. It made everything sadder. Miguel wasn't a bad person. He was grieving and angry and looking for some way to make sense of his mother's death. Someone had taken advantage of that grief and turned it into a lawsuit. But knowing the motivation didn't change the reality. We were still being sued. We still had to defend ourselves. The trial began on a cold February morning, 14 months after Maria's death. The courthouse was an imposing building in downtown Sacramento, all concrete and glass, the kind of place that makes you feel small. David and I walked in together, both wearing our best professional clothes, trying to look calm and confident even though I felt sick to my stomach. The jury selection took 2 days. Patricia was meticulous, asking questions designed to identify people who could be objective, who wouldn't automatically sympathize with grieving children over employers. We ended up with a jury of 12 people, a mix of ages and backgrounds, all looking serious and uncomfortable with the weight of what they were about to decide. The plaintiff's lawyer, a man named Robert Morrison, was good at his job. He painted a picture of Maria as a simple, hard-working woman who was exploited by wealthy employers. He emphasized the power imbalance. He talked about how we had asked her to drive our vehicle, to pick up our son, to essentially act as a chauffeur in addition to her housekeeping duties. He called it scope creep, suggesting that we had gradually expanded her responsibilities without proper consideration of the risks. He brought Carmen to the stand. She cried as she talked about her mother, about how hard-working she was, how she sent money home every month, how she talked about our family with genuine affection. Then Morrison asked her if she thought her mother ever felt pressured to say yes when we asked for favors. Carmen, still crying, said she didn't know, but that her mother would never have wanted to disappoint us. It was devastating to watch. Everything Carmen said about Maria was true, but Morrison was twisting it into something else. He was suggesting that Maria's kindness had been exploited, that her desire to please her employers had put her in danger. It wasn't true, but it sounded plausible, and I could see some of the jurors nodding along. Miguel testified next. He was angry, his grief still raw. He talked about how his mother had worked so hard her whole life, how she deserved better than to die in a car accident while doing someone else's errands. He said that we should take responsibility for putting her in that situation. He said his family deserved compensation for their loss. Patricia cross-examined both of them gently, respectfully. She asked Carmen about all the ways we had supported Maria financially over the years, about the bonuses we gave her, about the birthday parties we threw for her, about how we treated her like family. She asked Miguel if he knew that we had paid for the entire funeral, for the transport of the body, for the financial gifts to the family. She established that we had done everything possible to help them after Maria's death. Then it was our turn to present our case. Patricia called several witnesses. She called the accident reconstruction expert who explained in technical detail why the crash happened and why Maria's actions had nothing to do with negligence. She called the police officer who had investigated the scene and cited the other driver. She called the mechanic who had maintained our vehicle and testified that it was in perfect working order. She called 2 other families that Maria had worked for. Both testified that Maria was independent and professional, that she often volunteered to help with extra tasks, that she loved children and took pride in taking care of them. One woman, a teacher named Linda Martinez, cried on the stand as she talked about how Maria had once stayed overnight with her sick daughter when Linda had to travel for work. She said Maria was the kind of person who gave freely, not because she was pressured, but because that was who she was. Then Patricia called me to the stand. I had been dreading this moment for weeks. Walking to that witness box, raising my hand to swear to tell the truth, sitting down and looking out at the courtroom full of people judging me, it was surreal and terrifying. Patricia walked me through our relationship with Maria. I talked about how we met her, how she became part of our family, how much we trusted her. I described the day of the accident in detail, my voice shaking as I recounted getting the call, rushing to the hospital, learning that Maria had saved my son. I cried on the stand. I couldn't help it, talking about that day, about losing her, about Ethan's injuries. It all came flooding back. Then Patricia asked me about the decision not to settle. She asked me why I was willing to risk so much to fight this case. I looked at the jury and told them the truth. I said that Maria died a hero. I said that she made a conscious choice in a moment of crisis to protect a child, and that choice deserved to be honored, not buried under accusations of negligence. I said that settling would have been easier, but it would have been a lie. I said I owed Maria the truth about her final act. Morrison's cross-examination was brutal. He asked me if I thought I knew what was best for Maria's family better than they did. He asked me if my pride was worth putting them through a trial. He asked me if I realized that fighting this case was causing them additional pain. He asked me if I had considered that my refusal to settle was selfish. I answered as honestly as I could. I said I wasn't trying to speak for Maria's family, but I was trying to honor Maria. I said that I understood the pain they were in, but that pain didn't make the lawsuit's claims true. I said that I had considered everything, and I still believed fighting for the truth was the right thing to do. Patricia also put David on the stand. He testified about our financial support for Maria, about the relationship our family had with her, about how devastated we were by her death. His testimony was shorter than mine, more focused on facts and figures, but it was effective. The closing arguments took place on a Friday afternoon. Morrison gave an emotional speech about justice for working people, about holding employers accountable, about the value of a human life. He said that $2 million couldn't bring Maria back, but it could acknowledge the wrong that had been done and support the family she left behind. Patricia's closing argument was different. She walked the jury through all the evidence. She showed them the accident report, the maintenance records, the testimony from multiple witnesses. She explained that this was not a case about negligence or exploitation. She said this was a case about a terrible accident and a heroic sacrifice. She said that finding us liable would not honor Maria's memory, but would instead distort it. Then she said something that I will never forget. She looked at the jury and said that sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that tragedy is just tragedy, that terrible things happen without someone being at fault. She said that Maria's family deserved compassion, but compassion was not the same as liability. She said that the law required evidence of wrongdoing, and that evidence simply did not exist in this case. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of waiting, of barely sleeping, of constant anxiety. David and I spent those days at home, trying to maintain some normalcy for Ethan and Lily, but we were both stretched thin. Every time my phone rang, my heart would jump, thinking it might be Patricia with news. The call finally came on Monday afternoon. The jury had reached a verdict. We needed to be at the courthouse in 1 hour. David and I drove there in silence. We held hands in the parking lot, both of us too nervous to speak. The courtroom was packed. Maria's family was there, sitting on the opposite side. I tried not to look at them, but I could feel their presence, their grief and anger filling the space. The judge entered, and we all stood. Then the jury filed in, their faces revealing nothing. The foreman stood and read the verdict. The jury found in our favor. They ruled that we were not liable for Maria's death, that there was no evidence of negligence, that the accident was caused by factors outside our control. They awarded no damages to the plaintiff. I felt David's hand squeeze mine. I felt a wave of relief so intense it almost knocked me over. We had won. But looking across the courtroom at Carmen's face crumpling, at Miguel's expression of bitter defeat, it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving something that never should have happened. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them. Patricia hugged us and said we should feel vindicated, that justice had been served. But walking out of that courthouse, past Maria's family who wouldn't even look at us. I felt hollow. The victory came at a cost that went far beyond the legal fees. My relationship with Amanda never recovered. We spoke occasionally now, stiff and formal conversations about logistics and holiday schedules, but the closeness we had was gone. She never apologized for taking the other side, for doubting me. She said she still thought I had handled everything wrong, that I should have prioritized peace over principle. My parents slowly came back around, but the trust was damaged. They admitted they didn't understand the legal complexities, but they still wished I had found a way to avoid the trial. They said it had caused unnecessary pain for everyone. The implication was clear, that I had caused the pain by fighting, not that the lawsuit had caused it by existing. The worst part was what it did to our kids' relationships with their cousins. Amanda's children were 10 and 7, close in age to Ethan and Lily. They had grown up together, spending holidays and summer vacations as a pack. After the lawsuit, Amanda stopped including us in family events. She said it was too complicated, that she needed to maintain boundaries, so our kids lost their cousins, lost that connection because of an adult conflict they barely understood. Ethan, who was 9 by the time the trial ended, was confused and hurt. He asked me why Aunt Amanda didn't like us anymore. He asked why we couldn't see his cousins. I tried to explain, but how do you tell a child that sometimes doing what you believe is right costs you relationships with people you love? The community response was mixed. Some people supported us, saying we had been put in an impossible situation. Others thought we should have settled, that the trial was a waste of everyone's time and money. I lost friends over it. People I had known for years suddenly became distant, uncomfortable around me. Some of it was the awkwardness of not knowing what to say. Some of it was judgment, but we tried to move forward. 6 months after the trial ended, David and I established the Maria Gonzalez Scholarship Fund. We set it up to provide financial assistance to the children of domestic workers who wanted to pursue higher education. We funded it with $50,000 initially, with plans to add to it every year. We didn't do it for publicity. We didn't even tell Maria's family about it, knowing they wouldn't want anything from us. We did it because Maria deserved to be remembered for who she was. We also reached out to Raphael, Maria's oldest son, who had opposed the lawsuit. Through his lawyer, he let Patricia know that he didn't hold any ill will toward us, that he knew the lawsuit was a mistake. We asked if we could help him in any way, if there was anything he needed. He thanked us but declined. He said his mother would have wanted everyone to find peace, and he was trying to honor that. Ethan continued in therapy for another year. Slowly, he worked through his trauma and his guilt. His therapist helped him understand that the accident wasn't anyone's fault, that Maria's choice to protect him was an act of love, not something he needed to feel bad about. By the time he turned 10, he had made real progress. He still had occasional nightmares, but they were less frequent. He could talk about Maria without crying, could remember her with fondness instead of just pain. We kept Maria's room exactly as she left it for almost a year after the trial. It felt wrong to change it, to erase her presence from our house. But eventually, Lily asked if she could have it as her bedroom. She was 7 by then and wanted her own space. We sat down as a family and talked about it. Ethan said he thought Maria would want Lily to use the room, that she wouldn't want it to be a shrine. So we repainted it in colors Lily chose, moved her furniture in, but we kept one thing. We kept a photograph of Maria on the dresser, a picture of her smiling in our backyard, Ethan and Lily on either side of her. That photo is still there. David and I worked hard to repair our marriage. The stress of the lawsuit had created cracks that needed attention. We went to couples counseling. We had long, difficult conversations about trust and decision-making and what it means to be partners when you disagree on something fundamental. It took time, but we found our way back to each other. He eventually admitted that he understood why I had made the choice I did, even if he wouldn't have made it himself. I admitted that I could have communicated better, could have involved him more in the process instead of just digging in my heels. 3 years have passed since the accident now. Ethan is 11, a bright kid who loves science and wants to be an engineer. Lily is 8, creative and kind, always drawing pictures and making up stories. We're still in Sacramento, still in the same house, though it feels different now. We've lived through something that changed us all. I think about Maria constantly. I think about the choice she made in that terrible moment, about how she didn't hesitate. I think about the cost of that choice, not just her life, but all the ripples it created, the grief and anger and division. I think about whether I honored her sacrifice by fighting the lawsuit, or whether I made everything worse. I've come to believe that the lawsuit was never really about negligence or liability. It was about grief that had nowhere to go. Maria's family lost someone precious, and they needed to make sense of that loss. Our legal system gave them a way to turn grief into action, but it was the wrong tool for their pain. They needed therapy, time, and support. Instead, they got lawyers who told them they deserved money. I don't blame them anymore, or at least I try not to. Miguel was hurting and angry, and someone gave him a target for that anger. Carmen was devastated, and the lawsuit probably felt like a way to do something for her mother, to fight for her. It was misguided, but it came from real pain. What I struggle with more is my own family's reaction. Amanda, my parents, even David at times. They all thought I should have handled it differently. They thought peace and practicality should have won over principle. And maybe they were right. Maybe I was stubborn. Maybe I did put my need to be right above other considerations. But I also know that if I had settled, if I had agreed that we were somehow responsible for Maria's death, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself. Every time I looked at Ethan, I would have thought about the lie I told to make everything easier. Every time I thought about Maria, I would have felt like I betrayed what she did. The trial transcript is public record. Maria's heroic act is documented in legal testimony and expert reports. The truth is preserved there in official records that will outlast all of us. Her decision to protect my son, the fact that she died saving him, the evidence that we were not negligent, it's all there. And maybe that matters. Maybe having that truth officially recognized, even if it cost us relationships and money and peace, maybe that was worth it. Or maybe I'm still just trying to justify a choice that hurt a lot of people. I honestly don't know. I wake up some mornings confident in what I did. Other mornings, I wake up wondering if I destroyed my family for nothing. The relationship with Amanda is still broken. We exchange Christmas cards now. The kids see each other maybe once a year at a grandparent's birthday party, but they're not close anymore. They're practically strangers who happen to be cousins. Ethan asked me last month why Aunt Amanda doesn't like him. I told him it's complicated, that it's not about him, that grown-ups sometimes mess things up. But I know that answer isn't good enough. My parents are in their 70s now. They're not going to be around forever, and I think about how this rift is affecting their final years. They try to maintain relationships with both of us, but it's awkward. Every holiday involves complicated negotiations about who will be where and when. They're tired of it. I can see it wearing on them. David says I need to let it go, that holding on to guilt about the lawsuit won't change anything. He says we made the best decision we could with the information we had, and that's all anyone can do. He's probably right. But letting go is easier said than done. The scholarship fund has helped 3 students so far. We get letters from them, thanking us, telling us about their goals and dreams. One girl, the daughter of a house cleaner from Stockton, is studying to be a teacher. Another, whose mother works as a nanny, is in nursing school. Their letters make me cry. I think Maria would be proud of this, would love knowing that her name is helping other families like hers. I drive past the place where the accident happened sometimes. There's nothing there to mark it. just a stretch of highway that looks like every other stretch. But I know the spot. I think about those few seconds when everything changed, when Maria made her choice. I wonder if she thought about her own children in that moment, if she had time to think at all, or if it was pure instinct. I've talked to Ethan about it, now that he's older and can process it better. I asked him if he remembers the moment of impact. He says he remembers Maria suddenly being there, throwing herself over him, and then everything going dark and loud. He says he remembers her whispering to him, telling him it would be okay, even though she must have been in terrible pain. He says he remembers feeling safe, even in the middle of the chaos, because Maria was protecting him. That memory kills me and comforts me in equal measure. Maria's last moments were spent protecting a child, doing exactly what she would have wanted to do. But the cost was so high, and the aftermath was so ugly. I've learned things about justice through all of this. I've learned that legal justice and moral justice are often different things. The jury said we weren't liable, but that doesn't mean everything was fair. Maria's family lost someone they loved, and they didn't get the closure or compensation they wanted. We kept our financial security, but we lost family relationships and community standing. I've learned that sometimes there are no good choices, only less bad ones. Settling would have been bad for different reasons than fighting was bad. Either way, people were going to be hurt, relationships were going to be damaged. I chose the path I could live with, but that doesn't make it the right path for everyone involved. I've learned that grief makes people do irrational things. Miguel and Carmen weren't trying to hurt us, not really. They were trying to hurt less themselves, and the lawsuit was a way to channel their pain into action. It didn't work. They didn't get money, they didn't get justice as they understood it, and I doubt they feel any better about their mother's death. I've learned that families are more fragile than I thought. I believed my relationship with Amanda was strong enough to withstand disagreement. I was wrong. I thought my parents would understand my reasoning even if they didn't agree with my decision. They didn't. I thought David and I could handle anything together. We almost didn't. But I've also learned that some things can be repaired with time and effort. David and I are stronger now than we were before the lawsuit, in some ways. We've learned how to fight and come back together. Ethan has learned resilience, has worked through trauma that would break many kids. Lily has learned compassion, watching her brother struggle and supporting him. We've all learned that life can be incredibly unfair, and you still have to find a way to keep going. I've learned that heroism is complicated. Maria's act was undeniably heroic, but it created consequences that rippled outward in ways she never could have anticipated. Her death saved Ethan, but destroyed her family's financial stability. Her sacrifice brought our family together in grief, but also tore it apart in conflict. Nothing is simple, even love and heroism. I still don't know if I made the right choice. I know I made the choice that felt right to me in that moment, the choice I could live with. But I also know that my choice had costs for other people, people I loved. That's what I struggle with most. Not whether I was legally right, the jury settled that, but whether I was morally right, whether the principle I was defending was worth the damage it caused. Amanda probably won't invite me to her next family event this year. My kids probably won't see their cousins for another 12 months. My parents will probably spend another holiday trying to navigate the tension between their daughters, and I'll probably spend it wondering if I could have done something differently, if there was a way to honor Maria and keep my family whole at the same time. But I know this. Maria Gonzalez died saving my son. She acted with courage and selflessness in a moment of crisis. That truth is now part of the official record. Her heroism is documented, recognized, preserved, and maybe in the end that's what matters most. Maybe giving her that recognition, fighting for that truth to be acknowledged, maybe that was the right thing to do, even if it cost me dearly. I visit her grave when I go to Mexico for work, which is once or twice a year. I bring flowers and sit there for a while, talking to her the way I used to when she was alive. I tell her about the kids, about how much they've grown, about how Ethan is turning into an amazing young man. I tell her about the scholarship fund, about the students it's helping. I tell her I'm sorry for everything that happened after her death, for the lawsuit and the trial and all the ugliness. I tell her that I tried to honor what she did, even if I did it imperfectly. I don't know if she would have wanted me to fight the lawsuit. Maybe she would have wanted me to settle, to give her family the money they asked for, to avoid the conflict. But I think about the Maria I knew, the woman who took pride in her work, who valued truth and integrity, who taught my children to stand up for what they believed in. That Maria, I think, would understand why I did what I did. Ethan talks about becoming a doctor now. He says he wants to save lives like Maria saved his. Lily wants to be a teacher, to help kids like Maria helped her. They're going to be good people, kind and strong, and I know Maria's influence is part of that. The time she spent with them, the love she showed them, that's still working in their lives years after her death. So maybe that's the real legacy, not the legal battle or the family division or the scholarship fund, but 2 children who are growing up knowing what real sacrifice looks like. They know that someone loved them enough to die for them. They know that heroism is real, not just in movies and books, but in the split-second decisions of an ordinary woman in a terrible situation. Please tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong to fight Maria's family in court to protect the truth of her sacrifice and my family's future, because this decision didn't just cost me money and stress, it cost me my relationship with my sister, turned our parents into referees instead of grandparents, and left our family so fractured that my own children haven't spoken to their cousins in 2 years, and I'm sure Amanda won't be inviting me to her next family event this year.